Okay, shall we start? Amazing, thank you so much. So hi, my name is Fabian, and I'm a departmental research lecturer at the OAI, and I'm also the senior member of the OXAI Society. So it's actually the first time I'm engaging in my role as a senior member. I have been made like the senior member of the OXAI Society like a couple of months ago. And I was invited by Denise to talk about our research on the Science of Startups initiative, and it's actually quite a special week for us because we started this research group to actually work just yesterday. So it's our first week, and I'm happy to have all my friends and colleagues from the initiative here with me. But before we talk about all of that, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. So my first question, you can just raise your arm, would be, who of you guys knows anyone who has a startup company? Okay, so almost everyone. And who of you guys would want to start their own startup company at some point? Also, almost everyone. Otherwise you wouldn't be here, I guess. And who of you guys has a startup already? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, half? Okay, then tell me, what's your startup company about?
Hello, my name is Carly. I came from London especially to see you. I am actually a matchmaking platform for founders to hire and find the first 5 to 10 engineers. And we're doing the matchmaking based on alignment in personality, mission, vision, and values.
Oh wow, this is then probably quite relevant to you.
Yeah, it drove 2 hours to meet you.
So it is so you have a startup company already, and then you want to hire some software developers or something like that, and then you're gonna use the platform.
So what basically we're here to help all founders, non-technical founders, find their first technical partner, whether that's the founding engineer, technical co-founder, whatever shape or role. It's largely, of course, equity-based in these ways. It's really for pre-seed or seed level startups, where typically they cannot offer market rates, and typically it cannot be 2 years a 9-to-5 job. And typically the thesis is that the alignment for those kind of jobs, it cannot be looked at through the lens of employer-employee relationships, but it's really more like a marriage. So therefore, alignment in mission, vision, values, and personality is very important.
There's also research on like divorce of founders. The same mechanism seems to apply, so that your cortisol levels rise. You can track that with some kind of blood measurement, and if this happens, in a marriage, this normally leads to divorce, or is correlated with divorce, not leads to it. And the same probably goes for anything. This is super interesting, yeah. So I saw a few more raise hands. Yeah, then Ole, do you want to tell us about your startup company as well, which is also my startup company? Because we are working together in our own startup.
I think this would give away like the talk.
Okay, we talk about it later then, okay? And there were two people more, right? Who wrote that? It was you right here.
Yeah, AI for material science company, so we're trying to develop new materials for nuclear fusion reactors and using AI
Wow.
to support that.
So pretty serious. I hope this is still sciencey enough for you, at least, with the title Science of Startups. And there was one more of you guys? Yeah.
Building a platform to track misinformation using psychology and AI.
Super interesting. Yeah. And how about your pitch actually? You mentioned
building a platform to fight misinformation, but a great one. The one that people will love, the
Yeah.
one that will change the future of mankind, basically.
Yeah. Wow, I like it.
Lotusci.online, you can visit, you can try it right now.
So we're hearing personality traits play a role, certainly, a particular trait. So. Okay, so in any case, I think this is a lot of motivation we're having. Startups are cool, startups are a good thing, you want to do that. Why? Because it's innovative, it's always about new kind of technologies being applied to solve certain problems from all various kinds of fields. And a startup, to maybe give this definition, is obviously a new company, more or less, but one defined by using some kind of technology. And what we want to do in this research group, we want to understand, we want to make it a scientific process to really get to the gist of what makes startups successful on a bird's eye perspective, on a large scale picture. So not talking about all these individual level founder dynamics, even though they are very important, but trying to make it a quantitative thing. So what we have in mind at the end would be some kind of weather forecast, some kind of climate model of startup ecosystems to understand at a large scale level what could be done on a larger scale, from policymakers, investors, and so on and so forth, to foster more successful startups. We are just starting all of this, but we have this one analysis, one paper that I want to show you mostly, that is the foundation for our research. Just very briefly about myself, to introduce myself to you. I'm in Oxford already for 9 years almost. I started here working as a postdoc in 2017 at the Oxford Internet Institute. Before that, I studied economics in Berlin, Warsaw, and Vienna. And as a postdoc at the OAI, I did a lot of various different data science projects with Professor Mark Graham from the OAI, Willem Donwurter and Andrew Bourne from the business school. And since 2022, I'm a departmental research lecturer. And just to give you a glimpse of what we have been doing in my time as a postdoc, we have investigated the platform economy mostly. So what you see here, this world map, is connections between buyers and sellers of so-called online labor, platform work, and you see there's a very particular geography, and we try to understand why is the geography looking the way it does. So this is what we have been doing, and it fits nicely into, I guess, what the OAI is doing. But now my research has turned more towards the study of startup ecosystems. I guess I don't need to introduce the OAI to you, but for those of you who are not too familiar with it, just a very brief overview. So this is also how, among others, the initial studies there. A few folks here. So the OAI is one of the departments here at the university within the social science division, and we are doing various multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary research projects and teaching everything related, not only to AI, even though obviously these days is the big thing out there, and lots of fun activities too. Okay, so what I want to talk with you about today is a brief introduction. We had that, then the Center Startups Initiative, what our aims are, who we are, what we're doing, and then mostly about our foundational paper, the impact of founder development. And I hope with all of that to bring to you guys an understanding, appreciation that obviously personality matters, but it can also be quantified, it can be systematized and structured, you can think about it, and hopefully through that, maybe if you have not yet the motivation, even though most of you have the motivation to start a company, think about yourself maybe as a founder, and who the kind of people would need to be like that you would want to work. So why should we study startup success? So why is it a worthwhile research endeavor? And here's a few motivations. So first of all, startups solve some of the most pressing issues. Think of the COVID vaccines just a couple of years ago, essentially developed by startup companies, and they are vital for economic growth, as we're going to see on the next slide. But at the same time, most startups fail, and only a small number of them succeed and grow to become big companies, as we know, the digital giants in the US and others. And what we want to do, we want to reveal the drivers of startup success in a quantitative way, and then hopefully through that quantitative understanding, develop evidence-based measures to help startup ecosystems succeed. So here's a few facts around startup ecosystems that we can take a look at. We just talked about startups drive innovation, so they are really important in developing vaccines, the decarbonization of the economy, AI, and many more. And one reason for this is that startup companies obviously don't have all the legacy systems that bigger companies and corporations would have. At the same time, also startups are job creators. Even though they are very small, about half of all the new jobs are created within startups. At the same time, obviously, many of these jobs don't last for too long. If the startup fails, the jobs are also gone. But still, in terms of think of the renewal, like the economy moving forward and cycles of development and replacing older sectors, a process that is called creative destruction. Startups play a vital role. Then it becomes really difficult to find numbers. Hopefully, through our research project, we're going to find more reliable numbers here. But one that I found is there's more than 1,000 startup incubators in Europe. So if you think of one incubator dealing with a few dozen or maybe a few hundred startups a year, here in Oxford we have a couple of them. It's also really difficult sometimes to find a definition, but with incubator we mean any kind of organization that regularly deals with startups, maybe invests into them, but in any case coaches and supports them. So if we think a few dozen or a few hundred per incubator, we're talking of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of startup companies in Europe, and most of them fail. Again, numbers are really hard to get, but one figure that is often reported is that 75% of venture-backed companies do not bring back any investment money to their investors. And this is pretty much a failure. We should not look at it just from a financial point of view. If you think about it, 75% of the times an investor put money into the company and they don't get anything back. So this is pretty much obviously not a financial success. So lots of reasons why one should hopefully understand the success and failure of startups. And this is what we're doing in the Center of Startups Initiative. Again, we just really started following our foundational research. And who is we? This is us. So myself, I'm the principal investigator of this research project and the departmental research lecturer at the OAI, as I said. And with me is Ole Teuthoff. He's sitting over there. He's a senior researcher. He's not two, only one, sorry about that, also the OII. And then we have a couple of new people who joined us just this week. Paul Tobel, he's a researcher at the OII. Diana, a visiting PhD researcher from Technical University Berlin, and Florian, a visiting research student from TU Munich. And hopefully over the next couple of months we're gonna kick off a couple of research projects within our initiative. And we also were very happy to have quite some successful students who worked with us already over the last year. The students from last year that I had at the OII were Anne, Jennifer, and Victoria, and they all pursued their own individual research project that we are going to publish in the course of this year. And we have a couple of international collaborators, particularly people here from NYU Abu Dhabi that we're working with at the moment. And there's even an advisory board, industry, and academic advisors to that. So quite some interest from various groups of people, hopefully. And just to give you a bit of an overview of what we have done so far already over the course of the last 1.5 years since we published our paper. So we gave lots of research presentations, just as we are doing right now today. So this is myself with Oxford Prospect students in 2023. This is Paul McCarthy, the first author of our study, who gave a presentation in Germany, and then us having a panel discussion. We also tried to bring some more practical input to the whole debate by having organized a number of spin-out workshops, coaching workshops with students at the OII. So we try to bring across the basics of starting a company out of research, so out of maybe your student research, but still research-based. And we invited a founder who told us about her story. We had a startup coach who gave us insights into the startup journey. We also got a few more people from Oxford who started, Ilka, she started her own company out of her research in the anthropology department. We had Ellen who started, or is about to start her company now. She was also an OI student, so lots of practical activities. And we were also trying to engage with founders and startup ecosystems. This was an event that took place in a startup incubator in Germany where we spoke with people about our research and tried to learn from them. Okay, this so far is what we have been doing, but now coming to the actual gist of this talk, our research, our main study called The Impact of Founder Personalities on Startup Success. And here it is. So this paper has been published in the journal Nature Scientific Reports, and it's has been quite popular. We are very happy about that. This number is already outdated there. By now it has been downloaded like 115,000 times, so many people read about it. At the same time, many people unfortunately also interpreted it in a way we did not intend. So they thought we got the crystal ball. This is your personality. Out of 1 million people, this is your personality, and then you are a successful founder. This is not what we intended to do. Instead, I'm spoiling already a little bit, we wanted to show that it doesn't really matter who you are with your own personality, it matters who you work with, people that are complementary to you. I hope this is what we're going to get out of this talk today. So who you are in combination with whom you work with, finding the right team, building the right team, so something I guess that speaks pretty much to your startup.
Music to my ears.
Yeah, this is what the whole paper is about. And then the impact of founder personality combinations is probably how we should have called it. Anyway, so this is our paper, and it has been covered in the media quite a lot, so we were very happy about that. Okay, but now again to you. We wanted to understand startup success, as the title of our paper suggests. And my question to you is first, what drives startup success, and maybe also what is startup success? So these two questions. What is success in a startup context, and what could be drivers of that success? Anyone, any ideas, any comments?
Grit.
Grit.
I feel.
What kind of grit? Power grit or?
Like perseverance. Like
Yeah.
So, yeah. So how long do people keep going?
Yeah. Whether they can suffer, right?
Yeah.
I hope it's not all about that, but yeah, definitely a little bit, yeah.
Popular opinion is probably get VC funding, but I think in reality there's more and more what they call lifestyle businesses out there that are just like, that are just thriving on their own.
I would say what drives a startup success is really about networking and also determination, who you talk to, how you position yourself and the company and what's your goals, and getting the traction from the market that is needed, that solution to bring to life. So I think it's more about believing into an idea and getting through the journey with your network, I would
So
say.
let's say social capital maybe, the network as well as
100%.
personality. We have the grid element already, funding, venture capital, yeah.
Market opportunity.
Market opportunity, yeah, like that. So you mean there's a need
Yeah.
in the world?
Not just my need as a founder, but there's a need in the market.
Yeah, someone, yeah, could be interested in whatever you produce, right? Yeah.
Novelty
Novelty, yeah.
of the idea.
Novelty of the idea, yeah, absolutely. You also raised your hand, didn't you?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I thought you were asking about the bottom one, but I guess also timing, right, would matter. Coming with as well with the fit and demand.
Timing, novelty, right?
And
What is
being
novel?
able to put yourself out there to be noticed also, because
Yeah.
if you're
If I offer you farming opportunities on the moon, might not yet be the time. Maybe in 100 years we can talk about that. So absolutely right. It really depends also on the timing, yeah.
Mental illnesses of founder
Mm-hmm.
and their intersection. So ADHD plus psychopathy plus bipolar would be the perfect thing.
Oh, I wouldn't be
I
so.
wouldn't
It's strongly tolerated.
Yeah.
Strongly
There
tolerated.
is studies on various factors, but normally what is, I think you're getting in the dark triads often, like, you know, we have Machiavellism, psychopathy, and narcissism, exactly.
All are necessary.
No, I can't say necessary. This is a bit too strong. But there is investigations on the various effects on that. Also, we talked about this, you know, divorce of founders. So there's certain combinations that actually are quite stable, and others that are less stable. So all of this, yeah. Let's say so. Your own personality, your own psychological state, maybe in combination with that of your founders, yeah, absolutely plays a role. Yeah.
I was going to say team dynamics. So that
Team dynamics in general, right? Yeah. So we have clearly a personal element. You were one of the few so far when I gave this talk who actually said, I think the most straightforward one, just money, right? Venture capital. Often people think of the personal elements and the network, all of them play a role, definitely. The technology, so we can come up with many, many things. A few other straightforward, I guess, is the location. Where are you? Is it a good place to start a company? And many, many more. So with our study, we looked at a few of the standard ones, and they have been covered in the research world a lot. So obviously location of a startup company, this is data from Crunchbase, that was our data source, one of the big startup platforms. And what you see here, just colored, are the different countries by the share of successful companies, the number of successful companies, and you see clearly there's geographical differences, which partly reflect the availability of data, but also within countries where you had lots of data, there is still differences. Little surprise, the US is leading. First of all, Crunchbase is an American platform, so there's a bias on the data there, but also it's well known, the US, Silicon Valley, all of that kind of stuff is very much focused on startups. And with success, we haven't talked about this, we looked at exit scenarios. So an exit being, in our definition, the acquisition of a company, so you acquired a company or you have been acquired, or an IPO. So like a big financial deal, essentially. But you could look at other success events. We haven't talked about this much, and maybe I can ask you, what else? If not exit, what else?
Job
could be-
creation.
Job creation, yeah, beautiful.
valuation.
Yeah, validation.
Valuation.
Valuation, sorry. Yeah,
In
valuation.
the end, because I guess the most successful ones don't necessarily get sold, but stay in
Yeah.
growing group.
Yeah,
Humongous.
also possible. Yeah.
Innovation or disruption of the industry.
Yeah, like for example, maybe how much replaced incumbents.
Yeah.
Think of Netflix and DVDs beforehand and other things like that.
Market share.
Market share, yeah, classical one.
Like Brett's cases where a startup founder sold his company after 10 years, but then after tax, after everything, there was actually really nothing in it for him, right?
Yeah.
And then there's also cases where, you know, there's a solo founder who just has a profitable business and he runs it for 20 years and he's happy, you know? So then I guess that what defines success is a bit hard to say.
Absolutely, and it is a difficult question in its own right. And as we are talking about it, and as it is such an important endeavor of many policymakers, many institutions, locations out there to create more successful startup companies, it is actually a pressing question to understand what success means. And there is no common definition. Exit, the reason we're using it, and the reason it has been used by other researchers, is you can clearly measure it. An exit scenario will not go unnoticed. So if you sell your company, if you have an IPO, someone will notice, someone will add it to Crunchbase. There's other things. One that we would love to look at is survival. Is the company still in business? Really difficult, really, really difficult. Hence, you can also not really understand failure. And this is, if you take platforms like Crunchbase, once on Crunchbase, always on Crunchbase. So if no one updates the account, like an employee of Crunchbase, typing in company closed, and I want to know where they get the information for that this startup in India is now closed, then it will always stay there. So failure is really hard, or like non-survival is really hard to measure, hence survival is almost impossible to measure. So you could look at other things as well.
I have a question. When you think about the failure and the exiting a company, if the mindset of the founder is kind of cycle of getting more investment and more interest from other ways to get this funding, does that mean that this is continuously learning, or basically you should be getting to the point that you need to go to IPO, sell, and that's it, you know? I think it's quite interesting view, because I see people that started companies and they are getting more and more and more interest, and people more investing in more. So I don't see why they should exit the company, why they should sell the company.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, I think, one situation where the KPI or the metric that is being used is really driving the system.
Yes.
You know these stories about GDP, the gross domestic product, measuring only market transaction, hence care work and lots of other things not contributing to GDP,
Yeah.
even though they would be very valuable things to do.
Yeah.
And the same obviously with startup exits. So if the whole system is just, you know, looking at this one KPI, another one is, we talked about valuation, is unicorns. Everyone wants unicorn. Unicorn is a company that has a valuation of $1 billion or more. First of all, you know, does it adjust with inflation? I don't know. Who defined that valuation? Lots of questions around that. So the metric really plays a role. Absolutely. A company is not only successful if it has an exit. However, it is something that is being used, and we use it in our research here because we can measure it easily. One thing we also want to do with our research project, particularly looking at early stage success, because in the early stages of a startup journey, no one has an exit, right? This is always the end, hence why it's called exit. So what could be early success metrics? I misunderstood you. I thought you said validation. That would be like, you said validation, but validation would have been a really good one. Validation often being a term used to describe a business idea that gets some market traction. So maybe having the first customer, maybe this is
That's
validation.
hard to
hence.
quantify a bit.
I mean, the first person who
No, I mean
paid
from
you
your
that-
side then, as in how would you track some validation of a company?
Yeah.
And then, I mean, from you guys researching this, that would be a bit difficult to get this data. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
nobody
But if-
types in first customers.
No, absolutely, but if it was recorded, it would be super valuable, right? What is the time from you have the idea or some other kind of thinking about it more seriously and having the first person taking, you know, hand into their pocket, getting money out, giving it to you. This is like, I think actually maybe the most difficult step. Maybe exit is even easier than that. Anyway, so I just want to get at there's lots of different dimensions to it. Yeah.
I have a small question about the slides.
Yeah.
I feel like the figure seems to say that if you found in Europe or US, you will become more successful than in Africa, for example. But I feel like, in my opinion, it's mostly influenced by the nationality of the founders themselves. Because I think there might be a huge potential in the countries where it's like gray. And if you're like a European founder, there might not be a huge positive aspect about Europe. You know? I mean, you could also just found in Africa and it might be the same success. You know, it might be.
Yeah. So I want to say this is just a descriptive data visualization. So it just shows us where there are more successful companies as recorded by Crunchbase. Gray means no data. So no data could mean anything. Not less. So light green is fewer recorded cases. But again, there's obviously lots of biases. We don't take it too literal. It's only about location sort of matters. This is the only thing it should apply. Yeah.
Sorry, just a quick question. Do you know how many companies do you kind of miss by looking at your success metrics? How many companies do you miss that then, I mean, don't IPO or sell themselves, but exist and then prosper further on?
I mean, we have all the companies on Crunchbase, whether they have an exit or not, but successful companies being defined as those with an exit. This is, we're going to see a fair share. But so just one factor here, sorry, we should have talked about it before we looked at the data. Okay, location. Other thing that plays a role is obviously industry. I haven't talked about this so much. So this is the data from Crunchbase, the industries, and what you can see here is agriculture and farming has the lowest share of successful companies, and privacy and security, payments, data, and so on have the highest shares. And I guess this is again a reflection of where there was a lot of pressure or maybe a lot of incentives to go for an exit scenario. Maybe in agriculture and farming, you just don't want to sell your company. So it's not to say, oh, you start in agriculture and farming, you can't have an exit. By no means is this causal, just a reflection that there are differences among these industries. So location, industries, and then the business cycle, very important. So in the old days, in the early days of this maybe globalized worldwide startup network, let's say between 1990 and 2005-ish, or the dot-com bubble, there were not that many startup companies here. So it was relatively easier to be successful in these days than it was in the time that we ending our data set with here toward the late 2010 years, just because it was a big hype, many startup companies founded. And then also the age of the startup, very important. So the older your startup company, the more time you had, the more chances you might have had to develop your business model. So overall, throughout our data set, the older the startup, the better. We're going to see the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle, around 7 years, and many other factors. Then we talked also about personality and the individual level. So previous research looked at education, human capital, hard versus soft skills. So sometimes we have the idea of you need someone from the engineering school or someone from the computer science school, whatever. Then networks and social capital, you just mentioned that. So how embedded you are, and this is actually a very important factor. I think it's one of the strongest factors, and also possibly a reason for misallocation in the startup network or the startup world. As we are not able to easily understand the prospect of a startup company based on their tech stack or whatever they have, particularly if they have no business numbers to report, oftentimes social signals are being looked at. So are you coming from a business school, maybe from Harvard Business School, or any other of the big schools, Oxford, and individual personality traits. So all of this has been looked at, and we take all of this into account. We're not saying it doesn't play a role, we accept all of that. They are very important factors. But what we do in our study, we look at the personality traits of the founder team together, and we want to understand the role of diverse personality combination in predicting startup success. So this is the addition we did with our research to the field. So taking all of these things together, and again with a statistical bird's eye view, which is unfortunately ignoring many things and just brushing over many of the nuances that would be very important, we wanted to understand how the founder team affects startup success. And this is how we did it. Again, this research was, not again, I didn't say it. This research was published in October 2023, and the data analysis took place from 2021, like winter 2020 to 21. So it started really with a little hobby project in the second COVID lockdown and turned into like a really big research project by now. So it was all before ChatGPT, this is what I want to say. So our data is Crunchbase. And for the personality inference, we use social media posts of the founders from their Twitter accounts. So back then, the platform was still called Twitter. So we used their Twitter accounts, got recent so many tweets that we had enough words to look at, enough text to look at. And then we used a personality inference tool, a natural language processing tool called IBM Watson. It is no more. Now there's ChatGPT and other generative models, but back then this was like the state of the art. We put that into the tweets into IBM Watson, and the result of all of that was an estimation of the founder's big 5 personality traits. So the big 5 traits are, as the name suggests, 5 big categories. It is extroversion, conscientiousness, agreeableness, and assertiveness, and one more. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, exactly. And they have, each of them has 6 facets. So things in there are, we're going to see a few, adventurousness and others. And there's an estimation based on all of them, and it puts you, so if I had done this with your own data, we would have just inferred it from your data, and we would get a numerical value where you are compared to a reference group of people. And then we use all of this data, put it all together to come up with a success prediction, which you're going to see in a minute. Yeah.
Sorry, can I ask a question? I imagine if you're a founder, you're quite careful about the image that you project on social like Twitter. So how representative is really of
Yeah, so you asked the question that I always try to avoid. Go to the next slide. Yeah, this is a very valid point. There is clearly a bias in the way people present themselves, and we can even with the really big founders that are also nowadays said not be sure that they didn't have social media manager writing these posts. Unfortunately, something we had to accept. We have a big sample size you're going to see in the next slide, so hopefully there was some washing out of these effects. At the same time, the data itself, the algorithm itself was trained on social media data. So the way this whole thing came about was in the early 2010s, a research group that later started the company Cambridge Analytica, which we have all maybe still in our memory for their rather dubious personality analysis. They shared on Facebook the full personality questionnaire, 300 questions, like the gold standard questionnaire, to people, and they said, you can fill it out, and you got an overview of your personality, but in exchange you give us all your data. So people contributed all their data, which is already social media posted. It's not some particular language, it is what people use on social media. And then machine learning models were trained on this combination of the data.
Do you still have the 6-7 million data set?
The
magic source space, yeah.
No, we only use the tool IBM Watson.
Okay.
Yeah. So some people might have it, we certainly don't.
Okay. It was free. Anyone could download it, and I just didn't download it. I was like, really regret that. But yeah, I've been trying to hang out with them. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Worthwhile thing to do, probably. Yeah.
So the tool was already a training classifier that would output based on tweets the traits.
On social media data.
I mean, yeah.
Tweets are also social media data.
Sorry,
Absolutely.
like given the text,
Any
was
kind of
already
text.
trained to give you. Okay.
But there's I think hope or certain level of confidence that if you bring in social media data or something that has been trained on social media data, it gives you some sort of valid results. In contrast to if I were to use it on very different data sets. At the same time, we have also done some research already with a questionnaire where we are asking people, so like primary data collection and the overall features among founders seem to look similar. So we are confident it was not completely coincidence. So this is what we did. Here's our data set. It's quite a big one. We have 21,000 startup companies in our data set, 25,000 founders, and a total set of 26,000 founder startup combinations. So a really big panel if you compare to smaller studies, often just with a few dozen companies, a few dozen founders. So this is our sample size. And now coming to the actual findings, the most interesting part. So finding number one, there's three that I want to focus on with you. Finding number one is founders are different from the population at large. So what you see here, on the top of each of these distributions is the personality traits of the founders, and on the bottom half of each of these traits, the lighter blue, lighter green, and so on, distributions is the personality traits of employees, so of a group of people who are not entrepreneurs. So we're comparing them, and what you can see, I like to look at the middle one here on anxiety. Employees are just more or less evenly distributed. There's some anxious people, some less anxious people, just some variation. But the entrepreneurs tend to be less anxious. The entrepreneurs also seem to have high activity levels, less modesty, higher adventurousness, more moderation, and higher levels of trust. So they seem to trust more. This is just a few factors, there's a few others. It's overall, roughly speaking, 10 features that really seem to distinguish entrepreneurs from employees. So we concluded the personality traits of entrepreneurs differ from the personality traits of employees. We could use that, this is a bit of a gimmicky finding, to train a machine learning model that distinguishes entrepreneurs from employees with over 80% accuracy. So just putting in the personality data based on these two groups, we could tell you whether you're an entrepreneur or an employee just based on personality data. And essentially the way it would work is to say, okay, look, you are very adventurous, you have high levels of trust, and so on and so forth. This makes you very close to being an entrepreneur. It's not to say you are or you're not, or you are doomed to never be an entrepreneur, but just you have traits that correlate with them. So this is the second kind of view of this first finding. And the second finding is, even though the personality traits are already quite special and form a particular group of the overall population, there are 6 different founder personality types overall. And what you can see here is a 2-dimensional representation. Keep in mind it is a 30-dimensional space, so 5 big traits, or 5 big dimensions in the big 5, and 6 facets each, is 30 dimensions in total. And here we have used the non-linear dimensionality reduction technique to look at it in 2D. And what you can see, if you then cluster the data, is that 6 different types come out of it. We gave them some descriptive titles. Originally we only had 5, which is what we call it the fold model, but then we discovered the developer, hence we called it the fold model: fighter, engineer, leader, developer, operator, and accomplisher. And they all have certain traits in common and others that distinguish them, as you can see here. So here you see the 30 individual traits. The columns are the 6 groups, and the rows are the different personality traits. And what you can see here in the middle, for example, is where they are all quite similar, as we already learned from the first finding. Also here, they are overall relatively similar, but still each of these groups have their own particular traits. So for example, the engineer scores relatively highly on these traits, and this is imagination, artistic interest, sympathy. And then there's others where the leader, for example, the leader is also very particularly important compared to a few others, and you have the fighter also scoring higher on emotional stability. So some differences between these groups. And in order to put a bit more flesh to all these findings and make it a bit more tractable and understandable, we did another analysis. We wanted to find out about these people, about these personas, you could say, what kind of occupation would these people normally do, if not in a startup? So what kind of people can we imagine? Here the table describes their characteristic traits, and then we have the closest occupation fit. This comes from another study that has been done by my colleagues who work with us on this study in Australia, where they mapped all personalities to, all occupations, I have to start this part again. So where they looked at another large data set of employees, and they did the same analysis to get their personality traits, clustered them, and wanted to find out what is the personality of a particular occupation. And hence we mapped them to these groups, and we see that a few differences appear. So for example, the fighters, the closest mapping occupation would be software developer or computer engineer. So here's an image visualizing this. The operator is someone who would be something like a mechanic, so someone who likes to do things with their hands, maybe an eye for detail. This is the kind of characteristic trait. Then we have the accomplisher and the leader. They are more like the office kind of director posts. And we have the other group, engineers and developers, who are a little surprised would be engineers or kind of application developers. So you see the jobs that represent these kind of people are relatively similar, because it is a particular crowd of people already, but still differences. And all of this led us to hypothesize, okay, if they are so different, maybe in the startup they actually work and they also do different things. And this is the finding here. So we looked at the most important roles people have in a startup. This is the typical roles we have: Chief Executive Officer, CEO, CFO, COO, Chief Marketing Officer, and a few more. So this is the typical roles people would take if they are engaged in a startup. And then we look at our different personality types here as roles. And what we see is how these people self-select into roles. Look at the accomplisher, for example. The accomplisher is quite common among these first 4 occupations here, but very few in these kind of occupations. So accomplishers are rather chief executive officers or chief marketing officers than maybe chief product officers, or this is actually quite a big one, than chief technology officers. And the same goes with the leader. The leader, for example, is a person we identified as being like the people person, the team player. So the leader is rather seldomly a chief innovation officer, where you need to deal with the product more, and more often a CEO. So we see that people actually self-select into roles that probably fit their personality. So if they form a team, 3 people together, they divide tasks among themselves and find tasks that decide with their personality, or align with their personality. And we put all of this together for the third finding, which is holistic model that predicts startup success. So this is all the factors we looked at, and there's, as we discussed before, many factors at the same time, and they all influence the whole system. So it is, in fact, a complex system with many moving parts at the same time, which makes it so difficult to identify what's going on, particularly if we don't have that much data available. even if we have 1 million companies, we filter things down to the available data, we end up with 20,000 companies or 21,000 companies. And then there's so many factors, so vast in different timescales here, still only really scratching the surface. But still a few things stand out. For example, more founders is a good thing for us to be successful. It goes continuously linearly, but I think you see there's some kind of elbow here, so in the middle ground 3, 4, 5 founders is better than 1 or 2. Probably because if you have more people, you just have more manpower to do things, womanpower to do things. Also, you need some time. So this is the average time to success, and the mean is 6.3 years, so between 6 and 7 years. So seldomly a startup exits after 2 years. But also if they are going on for a long time, also maybe people are happy and don't want to sell anymore. And now the most important finding from our study, founder teams with diverse personality combinations seem to be positively related to startup success. So what we see here is an even more niche comparison. In green, we have the distribution of successful founder teams, that is those who went through an IPO, bought or sold the company. And in red, we've got the companies that did not yet have an exit event. Not to say they couldn't have one in the future, but by the time we collected the data, they didn't. And this is some of the big 5 traits that we're looking at here. And what you can see is clear differences. So, and by the way, the bars here show the maximum trait. So it's not the average, because the average doesn't make sense. If the 3 of us start a company and we calculate our agreeableness or whatever other trait, the average doesn't mean anything, because you've got yours, I've got mine, you've got yours. So we look at the maximum trait. So who is the most agreeable? Who's the most conscientious? Who's the most extroverted? Who's the least neurotic? Who's the most open person? And we actually see that, in fact, a successful startup team tends to have an agreeable person on board, a conscientious person on board, an extroverted person on board, one that is not too neurotic, and an open person. And the key takeaway from all of this is, you don't find it in one person. There is no such thing as a founder personality that combines all these things. I don't want to say, oh, it definitely goes only this way or that way. I'm not a psychologist. There's lots of research about that. But the point of this, if you want to have this signature, this fingerprint of a successful startup company, you better team up. You team up with someone who is complementing the skills, the personality traits you have. Because if they have complementary personality traits, they will also be more likely maybe to have different skills or different interests and would enjoy different tasks. Hence, your startup becomes more successful. You and the team, you need to talk to investors, or you need to talk to the developer team, or you need to code yourself. All of this is different tasks, all of them have different personality needs, I want to say. So team up with the right people.
Can I just point out that other than extroversion, none of these are correlated with dark triad traits?
Sorry, you say this is not correlated, or
well,
is this
extroversion might,
yeah,
right? But the others, openness, well, neuroticism negative, right?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say, like, agreeableness, openness.
yeah.
You don't tend to have narcissists being both unless they want to get something, or sociopaths. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know all the details about all that. I'm involved in a study at the moment where it's also super difficult to measure, because not many people know whether they have any of these dark traits. And if so, how likely is it that they want to share it? They start a company. Only for those investors who strongly believe this is a good thing. But so this study that I'm involved in, they interviewed people, and these people volunteered to give their data away, and for some reason they also knew about these dark triad personalities. And this is where they understood that certain of these triads seem to enter like a stable system almost. You know, the idea maybe if I bully you so heavily that you don't want to leave because I threat you all the day, maybe it's quite stable, maybe not. So, so it's a whole different story, but yeah, absolutely important. Again, also points out,
I've seen a correlation between entrepreneurs and having narcissistic parents.
Yeah, there's so much more that needs to be understood. But one thing is clear, your own personality matters, and understanding that of others matters as well, because only if you do know these things, we talked about it's almost entering a marriage, you're better off understanding what's going on. The same will go with friends and partners and colleagues, so team building in general. Okay, this is the main finding. And here's a few of these founder combinations we found from our data to stand out. So some of them are having vastly bigger chances of success compared to others. Again, it's also relatively small sample size, and if we split the data sets off. Here's leader 2 times, so 2 leaders and 1 developer, 2 developers and 1 operator, 1 engineer, 1 leader, 1 developer. That would be like the hipster, hacker, hustler kind of thing. Again, don't take this too literal or too serious, these particular traits here. This comes from a statistical clustering, from a statistical model based on certainty in it. The point is, several different combinations together seem to be more beneficial. Here, for example, is 3 accomplishers, so people that share quite similar traits. Also good because you have higher chances of, oh yeah, person's just like me, but maybe then no one wants to do the coding, no one wants to do the pitch deck development, whatever, and so on. And toward the quality of our prediction model, so the way we did it is we used data that was available by the day the company was founded, so the personality traits were there, as well as the location, industry, and a few other data points, and we predicted the success years into the future, so whether an exit would occur at some point in the future. So it's not that we use any data that would become available as the company goes on. Things like venture capital investment, we didn't take any of this into consideration because this could be a strong signal of future success, hence make people more likely to believe in the company. And a baseline model, which would be just random draw, so you just randomly draw out of the data set, would give you 15 out of 100 companies if you randomly invested, and our model would give you 37 out of 100 ultimate successful companies. So quite much better than just the baseline. And to end my talk here and maybe open for more of a discussion and Q&A, what can we learn from our research and what has now motivated our Science of Startups initiative? First of all, we saw that there is value of personality diversity that extends beyond the case of startups. Even you know it from your own study groups, you work together with some people, you just getting along better. So personality diversity is a new distinct dimension of diversity that seems to be positively correlated with performance and success. So instead of just looking at diversity metrics, thinking of gender, sex, race, social background, all those kind of things, you could also look at personality and maybe even these other categories that are more easily measurable than others might actually be a container for personality differences, because people with different backgrounds, with different experiences, with different social backgrounds, they might have different personality traits. Hence, maybe if you are at an engineering school, don't just hang out with your other engineering friends to start a company, but purposefully get someone else on board because they have a different perspective. And now coming to the stuff we're doing in our group right now, this research points to the idea that personality-specific support for startups could actually be a good idea. So if we understand personality matters, different personality combinations work well together, you could use that to build new teams and also give them the support they need. For example, let's say extroversion is a particular trait. Should you give the pitch deck training to the extroverted person or to the introverted person? It's not quite clear. It could be that the extroverted person becomes super good at pitching that idea. It could also be that the introvert just becomes good enough to pitch that idea. Not quite clear. So we want to understand together with startup incubators and startups, what kind of intervention did they get? Were they in any way related to their personality, or did maybe the effectiveness of these treatments depend on personality? And hopefully make people be aware of that. And then last but not least, this is the weather forecast climate model that I spoke at the beginning about. So we want to build a data-driven model to inform startup ecosystems. So we're collecting data from various sources to help uncover hidden success factors such as personality, and we want to do large-scale prediction and evidence-based interventions. We believe this is possible given the datafication we saw in many other fields already, and our study just contributing to all of that. And maybe last but not least, if you want to know your own founder personality, if you are curious to do that, we are also, Ole didn't want to spoil it, we are developing the founder personality quiz with our startup company. This is a screenshot from the version that is almost ready to be published. So you can see it looks quite cool. This is the data of the entrepreneurs and employees we looked at figure 1. So you can hover over it and see where you are in the future once you've taken the quiz. We are in the final stages of the deployment and will be able to release a beta version quite soon. So if you want to become a beta tester, you can just register yourself on this this form. And that's pretty much it. So thank you so much. Thanks so much. And I think we still have a few more minutes for Q&A.
We have 10 minutes, so.
Perfect. So any more comments, feedback? Yeah?
What's next? By the way, you got this now out, so what's the next challenge that you want to tackle in this space?
To be very honest, this one here is a big, it's a really big one. You know, I'm not a software developer by no means. Luckily, I've got a few supporters over there. So developing that tool is a challenge because it's a very different thing to create some figures in R or Python that look pretty or less pretty, and a whole different thing to, you know, create an interactive tool that actually brings valuable, actionable data. So this is what we're working on at the moment. I think this is for 2026. This is our goal. Getting this thing out and use it then as a data gathering device with the incubators in their interaction with startups. We have partnering with one incubator, particularly in Germany, who's also financially supporting our research. And this way we want to understand, okay, does it help you, first of all? Is it a useful piece of information as you go into your startup journey? And then through that, gathering more data, how it helps. And also, just in general, we want to get more of these early, the early activity measures to begin with. So at the moment, it's not clear at all what are important data points. From interviews and just some conversations, we heard, for example, that a key piece of information is the address of the company. Sounds so basic and so super urban. But supposedly, many startups in databases all have the same address, possibly from the incubator.
Yes.
So if a company doesn't update their address, seems to be a pretty good predictor of failure. So, you know, a basic measure like the address could become really important. You know, from like engineering and technological things that oftentimes, you know, information can be like the location of people can be triangulated from where their phones are, from 3 mobile phone towers. So also pretty basic data point that can become very powerful. And this is, I guess, what we want to get at. So what early metrics are there? Super basic things, and based on all of that, we would want to maybe develop some kind of startup passport, so some kind of framework thing that people should look at. So this is, where is he? We have our visiting student Florian here, and this will be his thesis to try to understand mostly these basic data points, and hopefully through that giving some concrete advice. Look, you are a startup, or more importantly, you are an organization that works with startups. Record these data points, maybe store them. Maybe we are thinking of some kind of whatever, blockchain based, I don't know what, kind of secured, trustworthy thing that complement things like Crunchbase to provide just more data for the whole study. Maybe a boring one, but an important one.
That's great.
And then
I have a lot of questions, obviously, but I will try to pile them together. I'm curious to see if you have any information on how much these traits can be developable. Like, can we become more open? Can we become more extroverted? I would be curious to hear that. And then the other question is the convergence of founders into these personality traits. Like, are we, would we be able to create as much innovation as we enforce founders to fit into these buckets and traits? I think I brought this up with you, but like the Silicon Valley culture of like tech bros, like, do we want all the founders to be the same? And how would that affect innovation?
Yeah, really good one. So maybe to respond to that one immediately, I think this is something we hopefully opened up a little bit with our research, or are about to debug, because there's these ideas, you need to be like this, and obviously the big tech billionaires, they try to obviously propose this just to worship them maybe, or I don't know for which reasons. And I think this is something we are hopefully getting at. You do not need to have this personality. No matter who you are, hopefully you can become a successful founder if you understand yourself within the larger system, mostly the team. So this is this one. And on the development of traits, So various different debates on that, and again tapping into very different research fields, mostly psychological. There is lots of tests out there, psychological tests. You know, maybe the 16 personalities test and others that are very famous. Many of them are basically for entertainment purposes. A few others claim that you can develop things. I mean, I don't know whether if you do some Sudoku, whether this really makes you whatever more conscientious. It's a completely different question. At least there are those ideas, and certainly the personality can change over time, normally through kind of really impactful things like birth of a child, also death of a spouse or friends, other traumatic experiences, or unfortunately also supposedly startup exit seems to affect your personality, which is maybe biasing our results a little bit. But in any case, this is possible for sure. It's not something we will engage too much with, I guess, because we just don't want to, tap too much into psychologist territory. We would leave it to others to develop that. But certainly you could, I think, become aware of your traits. And what we want to propose mostly is you are who you are. Don't become that kind of person that you see on social media, but stay the person you are and maybe find others that complement you and find the role that fits to you. I guess this is the answer.
So what's the kind of output of this? Because once you map all these personalities and you identify and you see yourself, kind of the ones that are you are weak, your weaknesses are the ones that, for example, the incubators could coach or help to develop better, and therefore you become more a picture of the successful one. What you say or not? What's the output?
Yeah, this could happen, I don't know, but hopefully more than changing the personality, it would be changing the system and the support people get, and changing the channel that people can go through, so that they, with their personality, can develop into the role that fit the personality, rather than changing the personality to fit into the role. So it's more the other way around.
But does that attract investors to see the personality, because therefore they see, okay, this is exactly what we're looking for, someone with this profile. Why me? That session that the investor looked. Why you are doing this? Why you are the founder or not?
So what I can tell you from conversations I had, I don't know how from the sample of people I talked to it was biased, but when I talked to venture capital investors, most people that spoke to me were already engaged in some kind of personality or person-centered investment practices. It could also be it was just this tiny little snippet of people out there, and there's a million other investors that just don't care about it. But there is a movement or trend towards investing in people, also from different backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds also, and so on and so forth. So hopefully this is contributing to that, let's say, diversity-oriented kind of investment.
Can I just add something?
Oh, of course, yeah.
So a fund is basically a way to get attention, right? It's how do you funnel startups to you. So like you give the example of certain ethnicities, the founders have to choose who's going to help them fundamentally. A lot of people don't quite appreciate and understand that, but the really good founders, they're very selective and understand who they're doing it. So it would perfectly balance out.
Yeah, but then the flip side would be if you use that kind of personality assessment to pick people that correlate with your previously successful people only. This is not what we recommend. And to be honest, I don't think it will work. As soon as people start turning things around and investing in particular personality traits, it could also be gamed and those kind of things. Could be this is not the way we intended to do, but hopefully rather a better fit between personality and startups and roles, and most importantly with startups. Okay, any more questions? Anything else? But other than that, we're also getting to the end of the session, right?
Yeah.
So then, thank you so much again, and